All right, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Conspiracy or Just a Coincidence. I am Jack Allen. Today, I got one of my favorite people in this crazy truther community, whatever you want to call it. My Star Wars go-to figure, and newly crowned author, Conspiracy Kyle. Kyle, welcome, and I'm happy, excited to have you on, dude.
Hey, thanks for having me. For a second, I thought you were going to say "Welcome to Conspiracy in the Force," and I would have been really confused. But no, thanks for having me. You were the first guest on my podcast, a few years ago.
That's
So,
dude. Isn't it crazy? Like crazy.
time flies, man. That was mid 2020, and it seems like it's been like 10 years since then because so much has been going on. But
Dude,
thank you for all your support over the years. It's really meant a lot.
But I remember when you first were going to start, I think you reached out to me and you asked me, like about pod. I think, right? You reached out because I think you started yours like 2 months after I started mine. It was like the COVID wave of podcasts.
Right. Yeah, dude. I joke in the book that I wrote that, I was one of, 5 million millennials that made a podcast during the pandemic, but it's like, it's one of those weird things about the pandemic, right? Because it caused so many people to look into things they never have before. So it got a lot of people into conspiracies, but I think it also got a lot of people into spirituality as well, right? Because a lot of times looking at, all the dark side of things, use a Star Wars reference, that leads you to the light because, there obviously has to be a counterbalance to that. So it's weird how this pandemic has worked out. It's been a crazy messed up world, but I feel that there has been some good that's come out of it.
Yeah, I think that's a great insight that it's like a dark world. So people look for I'm just repeating exactly what you said, but less poetically. But that's a great, I like that insight a lot. Cause you're right. It's more people have like, I don't know if it's the internet or maybe it is that there's just so much evil. There has to be a reason for this, like despair and deceit. Like there has to be a reason. And so it sent people like, what is that reason?
Right. And, and you can kind of take that two different ways, right? You can go full black pill, like, well, there's nothing we can do. Everything is terrible. This world's just going to keep going downhill and downhill. I might as well just screw it, just do whatever I want. Or you can take it the complete opposite way and say, well, this world is, if you hold the biblical point of view, this world is set to, self-destruct at some point. So maybe I can live my life to the fullest and in the best of my potential to, serve God and love my family and all that kind of stuff. So you kind of see people go completely opposite directions on this. So hopefully people are leaning more towards the good side of that.
It is hard. You're right. And it is hard to remain positive, but I think it's like, this is going to sound like narcissist or pomp. I don't know, but like it is, I feel like, especially it's like podcasting people who in this truth community, it's so easy to be so negative, dude. Like there is so much that is beyond fucked. There is, but there is so much also to be positive about and happy about. And it's like, if people listen to your show and even if they don't, it's you need to remain positive because spreading even more negativity of how everything is fucked is not going to help anybody at all,
Yeah, absolutely. And like, and we'll talk about my book in a little bit, but like, a lot of my book is about how in Star Wars, this crazy evil empire kind of started and grew and took over the galaxy and all that. But, I end the book with saying that, one of the best things about Star Wars to me is there's always the concept of hope, right? Like the first movie, they subtitled it A New Hope, which meant that there had been a tremendous period of strife and civil war and totalitarianism. But there was an ultimate hope at the end of that, at the end of one of the episode 3, one of the darkest movies in the Star Wars series, it shows the birth of like Luke Skywalker, who ends up, helping to turn the tide in this huge battle. So it's saying, well, everything is ruined and destroyed at this point. And for all intents and purposes, the galaxy is lost, never to be recovered. But there's always hope in every situation. I think one of the novels even had a really great quote. It said, in the darkest of night, that there is still a glimmer of light, a glimmer of hope. And even in one of the new Star Wars Disney movies, which I really, they're not really that great. If anybody out there has seen them, they can probably attest to that as well. There's not a lot of great substance to it, in my opinion, that is. But there was a really great scene in the first one, which is episode 7, of they were on this planet, and you saw the sky, like there was clouds, and there was a little bit of sun, and the clouds were slowly overtaking this planet. And the thought was that whenever the clouds overtook this planet, then the evil ones would be able to power this weapon, and they'd be able to destroy stuff. But while there was still light, I mean, one of the heroes said, "Listen, while there's still light, we still have hope." And to me, that was one of the bright spots in that movie, because that's so powerful that, like you said, there is always some glimmers of hope in the darkest of times. It really depends on your perspective and your lifestyle, and like you said, what you focus on. And yeah, true. There's a lot of negativity with podcast stuff. I know I've been there. I know you've been there, and a lot of people have. And I think it's important to bring some of that stuff to light. But even my wife had brought this up to me, a few weeks ago. She's like, "Listen, like you get all wrapped up in this about how you need to know about every little evil machination that's going on in the world." She's like, "Does that really help you?" Yeah, I'm like, no, it doesn't. You're right. Like reading 10 more Twitter posts about how the World Economic Forum is going to kill us all. That would I have been better off, like, reading a few Bible verses or praying or something, So like that kind of got me to think a little bit differently about how to refocus my life and balance things out a little bit better.
Oh, that is a fair point, dude. It is totally. What good does it do? I don't know what that answer is. I guess it helps to understand. You can explain to others, but it is tough. It's like that balance of, but let's talk about that. Even though you kind of touched on, so talk about your book. So that is, I told you when you finished it, what an accomplishment, dude. Like that's, my goal is eventually to write one, and you did it, dude. You did something that you have a job. You're not a full-time podcaster. I mean, that's really something to be true. I'm not just like pumping you up. That's like something you should be proud of. And, I bought your book. So anyone listening, you should go buy Kyle's book just to support. But yeah, so tell me about your book, or tell everyone about your book. Yeah.
Sure. So it's called Intergalactic Totalitarianism, with really great forward by, a former guest on your show and many shows, Charlie Robinson, who really has been helpful to me in this writing journey. He's written a few books, and I found a guy in my area up here in Ohio who drew this cover for me about the Death Star destroying Earth. And I thought it was perfect for what I was trying to write about. So it's called Intergalactic Totalitarianism, Authoritarian Tactics and Traits in a Galaxy Far, Far Away and a Galaxy Not So Far Away. So
nice title, dude.
Yeah, thank you. It's a little bit long. It kind of it's big words. So I'm like, after I read, I'm like, man, do I sound like a schmuck here? Like I'm trying to sound.
It's a good title. It's a good title.
Like it sounds like a college course, doesn't it? Intergalactic Totalitarianism. I'm sure they teach that at the public universities now.
Why it's good. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right. Yeah, why it's good. Why socialism is going to work this next time. But really what it is I talk about specifically the movies of Star Wars that people really don't care for too much, the prequels. So episodes 1, 2, and 3, which came out in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
And those movies kind of set up where the original movies take place, where this evil empire is taken over. The original movies, if you kind of think about it, it's kind of a dystopian type theme, although, it doesn't always get put in that category. But it really, it starts out where this empire for 20 years has basically just been imposing their will on this galaxy at large, right? And it's very overt. It's the complete opposite of, we mentioned about the World Economic Forum, where they're going to talk about how everything is going to be great. We're going to share everything. We're going to live these awesome cities. Like, no, like the universe is like destroyed. There's just like chaos and havoc everywhere. But it's like, how did you get there? How did we get there? So those prequel movies, one of the things that turned people off was there's a lot of politics in it. And what I really went to show is that the guy who ends up being this evil emperor of the galaxy, he started out as a politician. And I'm sure you're really surprised.
No way.
So he started out as a senator in what's called the Galactic Senate, and it did turn a lot of people off because they wanted to see lightsaber battles and this and that, but Lucas really wanted to talk about how a galaxy or a world or a democracy or republic is destroyed from within, in a subversive way. There's actually a great, see if I can find this here. There's a great quote from the actual, like the very first Star Wars episode 4 novel, which talks about, what happened. And this is a really great line about this republic, how it got destroyed. It says, quote, like the greatest of trees, able to withstand any external attack, the republic rotted from within, though the danger was not visible from outside, end quote. So, I think we see that here in America as well, right? Like the biggest threat to America is America.
Right.
It's like Babylon at this point. But anyways, what I go through in the book is how this guy, Senator Palpatine, uses crises. He uses the problem, reaction, solution template several different times to achieve more and more control. And it's no different than you see in our world. There's a million different examples about how wars have been manipulated. He literally in these prequel movies manipulates both sides of the war. Okay, that's going on, right? And I know you've heard about this from the banker aspect in our world. I know. Right. So really what I'm trying to do is show this as a parallel that, while a lot of people didn't really appreciate these movies, there's a lot of really deep stuff in there, especially how something went from a somewhat peaceful republic to like a communist takeover, for lack of a better term.
Well, dude, it's crazy because, I'm not like a Star Wars guy, but you wonder like who writes these. They get their inspiration from somewhere, and even if you're like a totally full on like MSM consumer historian, you believe exactly these stories in their mind are as evil or as simple as good versus evil. America's always on the good side. The others are always the evil. They clearly like pull these themes from real life experience, because you'd have to be like an idiot to not believe that there's gray areas in all of these problems that we face. Right. I have to believe it's all like a show, like people on Twitter and stuff like that stand on these firm lines, because nothing is ever black and white in life. Why would whatever the matter is, it's never that simple. I don't know where I was going with that point. I felt like Michael Scott in The Office, just talking and finding out where I was going. But yeah,
no, you're right, because George Lucas, he definitely, when the movies came out and the original movies came out in the 70s, I think he took a lot of inspiration from like the Richard Nixon administration, and there was a lot of fraud and corruption involved with that. So he kind of set up the empire as that, and then the prequel movies, people. So this evil emperor, obviously, he said he takes over power, and then he convinces this young guy, Anakin Skywalker, who becomes Darth Vader, to kind of be his number 2 guy in this whole scheme. So it's really Palpatine and Vader, like a 1 and a 2.
Yeah.
And it kind of, at the time, it rubbed me the wrong way when I read some interviews about George Lucas, because I was still very into the right versus left thing, right? I was very conservative, Christian, conservative, live in Ohio, red state, right. Like you vote Republican up and down the board. Doesn't matter. Don't research anything. Just go down the board, right? It's like the things we complain about the other side doing.
Yeah.
We're doing the same thing.
Right.
And Lucas came out and basically said that Vader and Palpatine were modeled after Bush and Cheney, because that's about the same time that was happening. And that really rubbed me in the wrong way. I'm like, why would you call George Bush Darth Vader and Dick Cheney Palpatine? Like it really pissed me off, to be honest, for many years. But since I've been researching this stuff, and you did some really great episodes early on about the Bush family, which really opened my mind to how terrible this family is. Not just him, his father, his grandfather, going back to the Nazi party, right? Yeah. So, but yeah, he definitely drew inspiration from that regime there, and definitely showing that Dick Cheney was really his emperor in this series, right. Which, a lot of that I think that confused a lot of people, but I know, and a lot of people listening, that he was probably the one really pulling the strings that whole time.
Well, you think you brought up like a few. I was going to ask. Well, the first point was that Republican and red thing. It's so funny, like, and I was involved in that too. Like we started the same time. We were both like Trump people, because it's just the other side was such insanity. But like the example, like all like the Bush family, they were best friends with the Harrimans who ran the railroads. The Harriman, they were business partners. Prescott Bush, that was like his mentor, was Edward Harriman, and Edward Harriman was a registered Democrat. You know, like once you like go down, like, so these guys went to the same school, they hung out the same places. The public is, you know, they're just supposed to regurgitate back. No, they hated each other politically. They didn't agree on anything, but yet they hang out with the same people. They go to the same schools. You know, that kind of stuff always helps. If everyone knew that stuff, it would be so much easier to break down these lines. But what I was going to say,
and you know, people make excuses, right? Especially like with Trump, like, you know, he filled his cabinet and people surrounded him with these swampish creatures that he said he was going to get. You know, DC was going to be, you know, he's going to get rid of all the swamp creatures, but he surrounded himself with those. But people are like, well, no, it's all part of this big plan because he's going to do this. It's like, no, maybe he just is buddies with those people. Sometimes, you know, the simplest answer is the easiest answer is the simplest answer.
Right. Or they'll say like, no, he just was bad at picking people or something, like some other excuse. And you're exactly, sometimes the simplest answer is,
right. And if he was bad so if he's bad at picking people, then you can't say that he was a good businessman either. So like it keeps going down. It's like, you can't say this without this. It's like, you know, if you have to go do these mental gymnastics to try to support somebody, then maybe you kind of need to rethink your focus on that.
Yeah.
Sure.
And it is tough though, right? Like I remember like again, because it was like right when we both started, when people would criticize, I remember getting a fight with Liv about this, because it was like we were fighting, you know, she's like way better now. She is unwoked. I've like destroyed any wokeness that's involved with her. But I remember she like brought up something like how Trump doesn't allow transgenders in the military. And I was trying to defend that, or like, I was like, oh, I don't know. But all these stupid fights over like, because you just can't get past it was like a personal attack on me. Right. Yeah. That's like such a crazy mind. And that's how it is for everybody on the left. They're this championing this, like, we love people, we were going to help. So if you criticize Barack Obama, you are criticizing their mother. That's how it's taken, dude. You are like going way over the line. And it's amazing how the media was able to do that to people, how we identify with these people who hate us, but we will defend them till the death. And that breaking out of that was like one of the most alleviating things in the world, because now I hate them all. And it's, you know, it's so much easier. Like people, I can talk shit with Liv's mom about the Republicans, and I can also talk shit about all the Democrats. So it works out perfectly.
Yeah. And like you said, it's all about emotion. If you can get people's emotions running high, I mean, look at what's going on right now with the Russia-Ukraine thing. If you don't put the Russian flag in your profile, that means you're obviously a Russian communist. You know, and you see this polarization happening all the time. You know, even you see the same thing in Star Wars. You know, that there's this galactic civil war going on amidst these movies. And it's basically like, well, we really need to get this army going to fight this big bad. And there's literally in the Star Wars universe, there's this form of media called the HoloNet, HOLONET, which is basically like your TV, right? Your mainstream news. And like reading some of the, you know, behind the scenes novels and stuff, like was really fascinating to me, was that just like in our world, this organization was pumping out propaganda to the people as well about this war. And they kept telling the people, well, guess what? You know, our republic is losing. You know, we don't know what we're going to do. We're going to have to keep funding more troops and this and that. And and so it puts people in that fear-based mindset.
Yeah.
And in that, if you don't choose a side, that you're with the enemy.
Right.
And it's that dividing line where it's like, if you're not this, you're this. And even at the very end of this prequel movie, you know, when Anakin turns into Darth Vader, he says to his mentor Obi-Wan, he says, you know, if you're not with me, you're my enemy, which is almost word for word something that George Bush said about the terrorists, didn't he? Right after 9/11, he's like, if you're not with us, you're with the terrorists. So I'm like,
now watch me hit this
like,
drive.
These parallels are just so on its face sometimes. But yeah, your point is well taken, that it's all about emotion. And if you're really getting overly emotional about supporting a politician, you know, whether it's Trump or like the big one, you know, now everybody's all about, oh, look at what Ron DeSantis is doing down in Florida and everything. And well, great. You know, people are in Florida are having a great time. I have friends down in Florida. They love their lives. They have a great time. They get to kind of do whatever they want. But still, at the end of the day, um, it's campaign season also.
Right.
You know, so they're gonna say whatever they want to get you in line
Yeah.
with what they want, which is the same reason why the other side has stopped all the mask mandates and they're getting rid of the vaccine, all that stuff conveniently in an election year.
So when you read about George Lucas, I've never like researched him at all, and you said he modeled after Cheney and Bush. I assume he's probably left leaning, right?
Yeah. He grew up in Southern California,
Okay.
so he went to USC, which actually, you know, Charlie Robinson, that, you know, he wrote the foreword for my book. He actually he went to UHC and like took like an art class in like the George Lucas wing at the college.
Wow.
So like he definitely and he has funded a lot of, you know, educational type things. But yeah, he definitely has a left leaning type thing. You know, he's been buddies with, you know, Kamala Harris. He's done, you know, stuff with, you know, Nancy Pelosi and stuff out there. So I think he's kind of a private person. I think his wife Melody, I think, kind of drags him out to a lot of political fundraisers and things that he probably would rather care less about. I feel like he kind of just has a disdain for the whole system.
Yeah.
And, you know, you see it specifically in the movies. You know, I think it's Obi-Wan who says, like, you can't trust her. She's a politician. Nice. You know, as in just like, you know, if you're a politician, you're this, which I think we can all agree with. But yeah, I would say he definitely has more of a left lean to him, more kind of a social justice kind of thing. But he's also not somebody that's like out on like social media and stuff all the time.
He's
right?
not
like,
Stephen King.
Yeah. He's not out there, you know, preaching all this kind of stuff. He's somewhat of a private person, which is good to see. I think, you know, you can have your political beliefs and stuff, but you don't have to bash people over the head with it either.
Right. Well, I think I just asked that because it's definitely like in the 70s, 80s, I could see how you think you're on the right side being on the left, because that's how insane it is, right? It's just switched. Like in the left, it was like free speech and anti-war, and the right was, you know, Christian values. You can't curse on rap albums. I mean, remember like Eminem was getting in trouble with the SEC. Like, what, dude? Could you imagine that today? Like, Eminem was literally in trouble, being sued by the government for putting, like, you know, crazy rap lyrics at the time on his album like that. And it's just flip-flopped, right? But I was just asking because, like, even like conspiracy authors, and even like Don Jeffries, do you know Don Jeffries is? He's like, yeah. So anybody, he's been on the show. Awesome guy. He's you know, he was a Democrat, a JFK Democrat, he calls himself. But all these people that were like free thinkers were on the left. And I just was like asking Kyle that because those biases of that even come out. Like this one book all about Alan Dulles I did a show on, and the guy's a conspiracy author. He writes, it was a great book, but the whole time he blamed everything on the right, and as opposed to the left, like, you know, FDR was a great guy and blah, blah, blah. And it's just funny that even people that are in our world, it's so easy for everyone to get sucked in. So that's why I was wondering.
No, you're right. And he definitely had that kind of anti-war aspect of it, and even like commercialism, right? Because like the Empire was like this big bad technological nightmare. I think Darth Vader even called it, like, you know, this technological space station you've developed. So, you know, for him, it was always like the little guys having to go up against this big bad, almost like a corporation, right?
Yeah.
Like that was always kind of their enemy. Because even in the prequel movies, one of the main villains is called the Trade Federation, which is basically like an international, like Fortune 500.
It's Amazon.
It's your Amazon, right?
It's weaponized Amazon.
Yeah, exactly. So you can tell he kind of has a disdain for that kind of capitalist mindset. But it's funny because at the same time, he also became like a capitalist billionaire,
right?
Under that system that he hated,
yeah.
And, you know, he almost became. You know, I think some of those prequel movies about somebody becoming an evil emperor, it was almost kind of a biography, I think, about himself too, about how he saw himself as out to do good. And then really in that prequel era, he was so rich and so powerful that he made these movies however he wanted. He didn't really listen to anybody's advice about what he should have done. So he kind of became that huge capitalist billionaire. I think that he kind of hated, but he also liked, but he kind of, when you get control, and that's, one of the big things to talk about in the book is what kind of traits these big totalitarian, authoritarian people have. And, it's always about just wanting more and more control. And, what kind of personality traits that these people have. One big thing I talk about is something that, I've related to a lot of people in my personal life is narcissism. And, I definitely think George Lucas displayed that. I think every politician displays that. There actually was a really good book that I quoted in my book about, have you ever heard about the 7 deadly sins of narcissism?
Not of narcissism, no.
So, let me see if I can find it here. So this person wrote a book about the 7 deadly sins of narcissism in the early 2000s. And I kind of touch on a few of these because to truly be like a totalitarian overlord, you basically have to have a lot of these things. And it's shamelessness, magical thinking, arrogance, envy, entitlement, exploitation, and bad boundaries. And, most people that are these high ups have all these things, right? A few of these to touch on. Magical thinking it was kind of a newer term that I hadn't heard of before, but really what that just means is just kind of an overinflated sense of importance or ego,
I see.
And thinking that you're so powerful and you're so smart that why would anybody dare question your authority? And I think Lucas himself, when he made these movies, I think was that same thing. Like he was above it all. But the same thing with the regime we have now, the same thing with people like Bill Gates, the same thing with people like Dr. Fauci, right? It's like who would dare question my utmost authority on these topics because I'm the one that knows everything. And obviously in Star Wars, Palpatine had that as well because he's like, I'm the only one who knew how to bring order to the galaxy. I'm the only one who could do it. Really, and everybody else is just an idiot and a fool if they don't fall in line with what I want to do. And you definitely see in our world that there's been a pretty big lashing out, right, of these people, especially think of like Justin Trudeau. Like anytime he's been confronted or people have tried to push him, he's calling them racists or anti this or anti that because they know he knows they have good points, but he also can't fundamentally in his own brain think that people would have a backwards opinion about him. And Jack, you did something really great on. I wish I would have waited a few months until the podcast you did last year about the whole Program to Kill series that you did, because you brought a lot of really good stuff into it about like the brain manipulation of a lot of people at a very early age. And I think that's another aspect of how these authoritarian people become what they are. Obviously, some of them became these serial killing minds, but then a lot of them go on to these high positions of authority in government and are able to try to rule over people. But like that's embedded at them from, unfortunately, at a very, very early age.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Like all those points, that was so like a perfect description of these top power people. And you're right. Like all these people, and I'm not saying George Lucas is this, but they all, when they get to the top, they all become these like corporate socialists where they made their money through capitalism. Usually it's been corrupted or they had a kind of an unfair advantage with funding or something. But regardless, when they get there, that's it. They want to end it and they want to decrease all competition, remove any competitor, have a full monopoly on them, because why would anyone not want to use their product? Is there a better product? Maybe, but just use our product. We don't need to compete. And that's definitely like what we see today is that these people dominate they're the ones who lobby. They're capitalists in name. They're sinos, capitalists in name only, because that's not what they want. They don't want a competition. I mean, that's like and I hate people will bring up like, oh, Teddy Roosevelt, the trust buster. Oh, blah, blah, blah. Dude, no trust has ever been broken up. Do you think Standard Oil just had to split shares? So it just became, 6 different oil companies, but he still owned 49% of each of the companies. Right. But Yeah, but corporate socialism, that is what's going on right now. These people at the top, they want to remove competition.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Amazon. No one is going to stop Amazon. It will not go anywhere.
Right.
And it's only going to be a certain
Well,
time
George Lucas found that out the hard way, because when he sold his company to Disney in 2012, for what, $4.2 billion or something like that, just some chump change. He had kind of the narcissistic mindset that, like, well, he sold the company, but I think they're still going to, let me tag along and, write some of the movies and stuff for him.
Yeah.
And he found out the hard way that Disney's just like, no, you're gone. You are like gone. Like he wanted to like write a treatment of like one of the movies coming out. And they're just like, no, like you can write some stuff, but here, we already wrote it. It's already done. So he found out the hard way that like he wanted to have his cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
But Disney was a bigger fish. One really good quote from one of the prequel movies, they're going through this ocean and they're being attacked by this giant fish. And then another fish comes up and eats that fish. And the quote goes, there's always a bigger fish.
Yeah.
So like he thought he was this big wig, but then Disney, which, to your point about this media consolidation, Disney pretty much owns everything now. I can't think of, maybe one or two news outlets or everything that they don't own. It's disgusting at this point.
They own it, dude. Someone in the chat said, do you know who the Moons are, the Muns are in Star Wars?
Yes, they were like a banking clan.
Yeah, someone said the Muns are the R kids, and I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. But so the Muns, what, they're like a banking cartel in Star Wars?
Yeah. They were. So no, that's interesting. A point, because my very first episode of Conspiracy in the Force, I brought up the whole conspiracy about. Oh, sorry, my cats are fighting.
Oh,
back
hey,
here.
They're having fun. Awesome.
The first episode I did was about the Titanic, and a lot of the conspiracies about it. How was it that J.P. Morgan got off it, and some of the people on it were opponents of the Federal Reserve, and it took them out. Which I don't know if it's true or not, but it's an interesting theory. But I tied that into Star Wars because at the end of Revenge of the Sith, which is episode 3, after Palpatine used these trade people, right? He'd use these bankers, use these manufacturers, people in the industries to help him achieve all these goals and manufacture this war back and forth. After he really achieved full power, he sent Darth Vader to go kill all those guys, all those leaders, right?
Nice.
So they were the useful idiots the whole time. And he sent them all into this lava planet, and then Darth Vader went in there, and the first one he killed was the leader of the intergalactic banking clan. I forget his name, but he was a Mun, or a Moon, M-U-U-N. So that's kind of how I tied it into the Titanic thing, because like he was basically taking out the bankers, like that was also being taken out on the Titanic.
Well, the Titanic, I hate that theory, because I don't know if you've ever seen me.
Well, it doesn't make sense, because I think one of them on there was one of the big
he was
Illuminati
an Astor family. The Astors are. They created like the British CFR, it's called the Royal Affairs Institute of International. It's a long ass name, but they funded it. They gave the funding money for it.
Yeah,
a globalist okay, they care about you guys. Yes, they killed him because and I'm sure there was a and I've seen the insurance theory.
Yeah,
but I've also seen that like debunked. But there
like that. That's one like I go back and I'm like, It's one of those things. It's an interesting theory.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing to think about, but so I think sometimes we go down too many rabbit holes that doesn't really do us any good.
But I like that killing the top dude. They like do the R kids. They funded, like, they had their banking agents all over America, and eventually, like, one guy got too much heat on him. Everyone knew he was an R child agent, and like the Americans did, even in the 1830s, and they didn't want to deal with him. So they gave him his funding, like start his bank or whatever he had. They crashed it on him, took everything he had, because he became unuseful now.
Yeah.
His cover was blown, and they put a new guy in who's, I think his name's Sheldon. His statue is outside the British royal family, a banker statue. That's always nice, because or he's outside the Bank of England statue.
But it was interesting that even in Star Wars, they went down this useful idiots rabbit hole, which I think a lot of people probably didn't put two and two together. I know I didn't when that happened, that, that's something that happened in, Soviet Russia. The great interviews with Yuri Bezmenov, the former KGB agent, from the 80s. He talked about that all the time, that, he's like, we didn't fool with the leftists, because at a certain point they think that they help the communists come to power, and they think they're going to be a part of it. And no, they're too dangerous, because they know too much.
Yes.
Just like all these bankers in Star Wars, like they knew too much, and the Emperor didn't want to share any of that. And so, but the interesting part about that whole thing too is that I actually found this out recently, that what he did, so he took out all the leaders of all these organizations, and then basically brought all the industries under the government. So they're no longer capitalist type things. They're now all under the control of the federal government, which, for all intents and purposes, I think a lot of loosely are in our country as well. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, all your Amazons, Googles, I mean, they're doing all the government's bidding all the time. Maybe not in name specifically, but they're doing all the bidding of all the government agendas.
It's just a little bit. So that's like social, boomers love like, oh, that's socialist. And it is what we have today. It is a socialism of sorts, but the only difference now is, instead of the government being in charge, the corporations run the government. So that's why it's the, I forget, God, I'm blanking on the author's name, who I love. Oh, Anthony Sutton. He coined it as corporate socialism. So it's socialism. There's no monopolies, blah, 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 but everything is not state owned. It's corporation owned. And that's literally what we have today. The government doesn't act independently. Never. They haven't for the past 50 years. So yeah, that's exactly like what that is. It's just, instead of the government, it's the Death Star creator, whoever that is.
And what, there's some really interesting stuff I put in the book too, about not just the movies. There's been some animated series that have come out that have kind of filled the gap between that prequel era and this original trilogy era, talking about how this empire really started rolling out all of these control mechanisms. They basically invalidated the currency. They said that there was a galactic credit, and they said, well, guess what? Now we have an imperial credit. And what you can do is you can exchange that, today at a 1-to-1 basis for this imperial credit, but you basically have to register for like a galactic, what's called a chain code, which is just basically like an intergalactic ID. So it's like with strings attached to it. It's like, you can get this new currency, but you have to abide by all our rules, and now we have to have all your information. And in being in a sci-fi world, like this identification, this chain code, it was more than just an ID. It basically contained like biometric data on you too. So like, and this was rolled out in a show like a year ago. Okay, so you have to know that there's a little bit of predictive programming going on there about things happening in our world. I think on a few fronts, as far as non-paper identification rolling out, and of course, like just a currency, which could be something that's a government helmed crypto, which I think even this week, right, didn't Biden say something about wanting to put some restrictions on crypto?
Yeah, that, and I saw that, I like an article, New York Times or something, like maybe it's time for the federal government to create a crypto, or something like that.
Right. And it's the thing that all the conspiracy theorists talking about this like 5-10 years ago, about this whole like, Fed coin thing, like, oh, they're so crazy. What? That's never going to happen. It's like, well,
well, dude, even like, and wherever, there's so many more and more people waking up, and they, I think they're not going to be able to get away with it yet. But like, even Social Security, dude, like America was this, our founding fathers were badasses, dude. They travel to a new place with nothing. I mean, that is unfathomable. And, this is a free nation, in quotes, but this is so free. And then Social Security, and it kind of is a similar thing. Like, oh, well, you guys want money for when you get older. Oh, you want to get free health care when you're over 65. Well, if you're going to do that, you're going to need to have a Social Security number. How do you do that? Well, you're going to get a number system for us to do that. And it's upsetting that in the 30s, nobody said, dude, why does the government need to know who I am and what my name is and all this stuff like that? But you can see how it's done. You give those little rewards, just like they're going to do soon with what the ultimate conspiracy of tracking, tracing, chipped. You want to be able to, whatever it is, dude, go to watch the movies or watch sports ball. You'll need to have this, just kind of like they were doing with the poke, but I guess that kind of pulled back. But
yeah. And that's a great point, because this whole chain code, wherever this idea in Star Wars that they were rolling out, one of the big things was that you couldn't travel without it. So if you're on a planet that is being overrun by this empire, and you're like, man, I got to get out of here. Well, no, you can't, unless you play ball with their rules. Like, they were like impounding spaceships, and just really oppressing people. So really the only two options you have was just this run and hide where you are, or play ball, and they can always track you wherever you go. It's kind of a really frightening thing. And this was in an animated show on Disney Plus like a year ago. Okay, so it's just wild that kind of stuff was out there. And I think one problem I have with a lot of Star Wars fans is that I think I don't know if it's a problem, but like I think a lot of people, and maybe I'm just too far down the rabbit hole to see this with clear eyes, but a lot of people just kind of gloss over that kind of stuff, right? Oh, it's just a TV show, it's this or that. Right. It's like, oh, it's just a fictional universe. That's not really going to happen here. Our world isn't Star Wars. It's like, no, these. I think there's little nuggets in all these bits of entertainment that give you a little bit more of the story of what's going on than even the news does, which we know is complete BS. I think all these shows kind of drip out that little information, that whole the revelation of the method type deal.
I'm working on a book, Rulers of Evil, and it's like a guy who is writing about the Jesuits, and so all these like so at the time, you had the Catholic Church, and then you had people reading the Bible. So they wanted to combat people reading the Bible. They realized through the Inquisition, okay, we can't just kill everybody. So what can we do? And they started realizing that people loved entertainment, plays. And so what they start doing is the Jesuit groups, they were at all the colleges. They started having theater and plays, and they were writing their stories, things that they would make fun of Protestants, or like, put little, like maybe it was like a little under the surface, like this guy was an idiot who read the Bible or whatever it was. And then eventually Shakespeare, who was probably like Francis Bacon or something, I don't know who, but he was possibly like a Rosicrucian, a part of these society. I mean, entertainment, they've learned this now for like 600 years, that we are stupid people who just want to be like entertained. We will. And the quote they used was, the one Jesuit was, one play people will remember more than 100 sermons. And dude, that is, I mean, look at our society today. Dude, people will talk Netflix series for days, but they could not tell you a single thing that happened in history beyond World War II. That's everyone knows World War II, but that's about it.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think people really need to realize what they're focusing all their time and energy on. And obviously I'm not one to talk. I mean, look behind me, I got all these Star Wars knickknacks.
We all need a hobby, dude.
But at the same time, I also realize that there is a deeper purpose to life than all this entertainment, right? It's about for me personally, it's about my belief in God and my Christian beliefs, and that's an ultimate goal, higher than anything on this world that we attain to. I mean, I think we can like things and appreciate things and talk about conspiracies and this and that, but I think at the end of the day, there is something more important than kind of stuff in Netflix shows. And yeah, like I'm totally over Netflix 100% at this point, just because all the shows just, they have the same agendas, and you see it rolling out. By the second season, somebody has come out of the closet, right? The white male character. By the third season, he's like the villain now.
Yeah.
And it's just such programming, but also, like I said about Star Wars, a lot of fans don't really get some of these deeper things that are being shown in there. I think with the Netflix as well, and I think that's scary because it's normalizing more and more things that are against the teachings of the Bible. And,
Yeah.
even if you don't fully believe in those things, I think it's like, it's like a seed that just kind of grows and grows a little bit inside of you until you fully think all these things are normal, all these things are okay.
Yeah.
But really, it's just because you've been basically, slow acting poison over a long period of time.
That's a great dude. I mean, and like I said about the Jesuits, did all these plays, so they realized they could get them that way. And then I tweeted like there was this quote or a statistic like how the teaching of history, and it was history and I think like a literature one, since like in colleges only like 22% or something like that require a history class, and now it's probably even less. But if you flood people with just entertainment, they don't read anything, they don't know history. So now you're just going to go by these TV shows, maybe if you watch one of those, but you'll think that things that are unnormal that are being normalized are normal when they're not. When humans have survived for thousands of years a certain way, being monogamous creatures. I mean, that's how we built the foundation of society. And now they're telling you that's wrong. And if you don't question that, you'll believe it, dude. I mean, think how many people like are like either on OnlyFans or polyamorous. It's insane, dude. And people like I saw a New York Post article like 1 in 5 people consider doing an OnlyFans or something like that. Like even 20, you can't tell me that these things aren't being normalized, because if you said you were going to strip 20 years ago and 20% of your graduating high school class said, yeah, I think that'd be a good idea, you would, I don't know where you went to school, dude, because it didn't exist, right? Or maybe you're like in a third world country. But yeah, just
in the inversion of it all, right? I was listening to this some of my friends down in Florida, they started going to this church, and the pastor has a really good podcast where he talks about,
that's nice.
2 episodes a week. One is a real scripture based, and one is talking about culture and things going on in our culture, and kind of how to approach kind of these things in the conversations about what's going on. And one thing he was talking about is like about this inversion that has been going on, where you can get somebody that wants to come into the workplace, in like a guy wearing a dress or something like that, and that's okay. And and if you're the person that's uncomfortable with that, then you will literally get bullied for being uncomfortable with that, even if you kind of just say the wrong thing. But on the flip side, if you have somebody coming into the workplace that's overbearing about like the Bible, right, preaching like fire and brimstone, that would be also considered bullying, but that's not socially acceptable. Preaching the word of God is considered bullying, but somebody pushing a trans agenda is not considered bullying. And it's just a total inversion of our world. And like you mentioned about these entertainment things. Yeah, there's the really uncomfortable things like that. The really bad agendas, but then also, something, you and Sideshow Bob had talked about a few months ago on your podcast about sports, or maybe it might've been on his show, about sports and going to sporting events. It's the whole bread and circus thing, where it sets up an artificial conflict, right, between two different sides. And it's like, oh, you're the blue team and I'm the red team, and I'm not supposed to like you because you have this different color. And it's this whole artificial battle that's set up that really doesn't matter in the long run, but it also gets your mind set in this this or that narrative, right, which people follow into, politics follow into, social issues. And it's just kind of it's a further degrading of culture as well, but it's one of those that's very subversive, unlike some of the stuff we've been talking about the Netflix and the programming there.
Well, dude, I don't know if this really relates, but entertainment is so polluting and powerful and addicting. Think of like all these stories of propaganda about Zelensky, like I don't need a ride, I need ammo, which has not been proved. He didn't say that. He didn't freaking say that. And all these stories of and it's like amazing how people, like, I look at the propaganda from like World War II, I'm sure you've seen that propaganda. Yeah. And you're like, how do people like, wow, dude, they would be like, beat back the evil Hun, or there'd be one with like a Japanese guy with like a rat face. Like,
oh yeah. I mean, I think Dr. Seuss, right? Theodore Geisel, he was a big U.S. propagandist artist for the U.S. Some really horrible, like racist descriptions of like the Japanese. And like, I think there was even like some old like Popeye episodes, like really racist stuff about him just like beating up Japanese on a boat or something. Like that was just disturbing.
but you see it's how it's happening today, dude. Like first you have this Marvel created guy like Zelensky, who's the president of Ukraine, if anyone lives under a rock. And then also I just saw like how Facebook and Twitter are allowing violence towards Russians. Like, dude, we are so, and that's why they remove history, because dude, if anyone has even spent like a few months reading history, you'd realize, wow, like these people weren't really the devil. You know, we did some evil stuff too, and you'd see there's this gray area, but people are so dumb they just watch Marvel movies and Netflix. So it has to be a clean cut.
Yeah.
This is the evil guy. This guy is the good hero. He's the guy fighting back.
Yeah.
And dude,
and that's what I really and that's what I really liked about these Star Wars prequel movies, because it really showed how much of a gray area there really is. Because even like the Jedi, right? Like the Jedi, they got the lightsabers, they're the good guys, right?
Right.
Throughout this whole series of movies, it shows how they were manipulated and led astray just like everybody else. So it showed that even the people who were supposedly the good people are also prone to I don't want to say being actively evil or with the evil side, but complacent as well.
Yeah.
So it showed that, yeah, there, and that's definitely a big contrast between those movies and what you see in this Marvel stuff, right? It's very black and white. Even like the original Star Wars is very black and white. Like, you know who the good guy is, you know what the bad guy is. But with these prequel movies, it was very, very gray, because even the good guys in the end, they lost. And they had to go through a period of many years. And there's actually a series coming out soon about this period of time where Obi-Wan Kenobi has to basically go and meditate on all his losses.
Okay.
You know, he screwed up really bad. And it definitely shows that there was no hero character in this whole trilogy, which is really odd, because most trilogies, you kind of see it build towards like a really triumphant end, right? Think of, Lord of the Rings or any of those movies. And these are like, it ended up on a downer. There was really no heroic end to it. But yeah, the whole idea about what's going on over there now, especially like you said, with what's happening to and how Russian citizens are being treated, across the globe now, it's disgusting. Yeah. And it's completely counter to what we were told about, the thing that's happened over the past few years that started, the month after February 2020. You can't treat a certain race of people differently because of where something may have come from. Right? We were told that. And then also after 9/11, what we were told happened there, and the people supposedly involved with that, you can't treat those people different because they had nothing to do with it. But for some reason, there's a concerted global effort to oust this certain population, which, I talk about a little bit in the book, and, a lot of people have done content on before about the whole, the 10 stages of genocide. I mean, it's very frightening how quickly you can go from polarizing a population of people to eliminating a population of people. And it's really disturbing, but it's the propaganda has to roll out in a certain way for the people to think that it's okay of this future dark deed that's going to happen. And it's really disgusting and disturbing. And I think, who knows, we can't predict the future. We don't really know where this is all going to lead, but it's all the same telltale signs of putting this population on the chopping block for whatever reason. We don't really know at this point. I mean, for all we know, these people are being oppressed as bad as the people in, our Ukraine are being affected by the Russian government, so it's really sad when just average everyday people get caught in the crossfire and are used as political pawns in this.
Dude, I totally agree. It's like in this, the fact that they're okaying hating people, like how, and I always like how would you feel if that was you? Like, you have no control where you're born. You have no control what color your skin is. And that's why I get so angry when they do these blanket statements of like, you're inherently racist or you're inherently bad. Like, I worry for our young generation of white males, because dude, they are against all odds. They are told they are evil and all these things like that. And so I think that's what I assume plays a part in this, allowing to beat up on Russian people, because they're conservative. They hate conservative. They hate traditional. They hate, European descent. and it's much easier to beat up on that because it goes along with all of these points that they've been making for the past 5 years.
Right. Right. And I mean, from what I've heard, there's a lot of, fundamentalist Christians living in Russia as well, but, they kind of have to go underground to kind of be able to preach the gospel and stuff, because, some of this stuff isn't as culturally acceptable, in that society. So it's like, yeah, you're affecting all those people as well as everybody else. And it's really sad, but like, is that just a beta test for something they want to roll out in the future for another set of people? It's wild, man. It's wild.
So I'm going to change the topic a little bit. So this will be like our last topic. So I think I commented on one of your posts about fascism inherently bad. So I wanted to get your take on, I know that like your book like is pretty much about like an NWO totalitarian world where everyone is a peasant, a slave. But I wanted to see, have you ever looked into a monarchical form of government or a nationalistic, a Tatooine dictator as opposed to the galactic dictator? Isn't that a planet, Tatooine?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, good pull there. Good pull there. So yeah, I can tell you about there is something in Star Wars that may be similar to that, but I don't know if it's the exact thing of what you're saying. Well, I guess a few different things. This empire tried to pose itself not really as a dictatorship.
Okay.
The emperor kind of closed himself off like from the galaxy to do whatever his dark side, whatever those rich and powerful billionaires do in secret. He wanted to keep doing that.
They read books and they pray on the Bible.
They read books. They go to islands, around the Bahamas areas and just kind of hang out.
Just hang out in weird robes and chant.
In weird robes and weird Egyptian-looking buildings. But they set up like regional governors. He said like these are regional governors kind of ruling these areas. So that's how they tried to make it sound less totalitarian. Okay. But then also after this government fell, you kind of saw a lot of it. And that's always the interesting thing. And it's probably a little bit more for me to research. I think maybe you've done some research on this as far as whenever some of these big empires fall, like what fills that power vacuum, in this new series that just ended a few weeks ago, this Boba Fett series, it took place on Tatooine. And
nice.
People that probably know Jabba the Hutt died, and he was basically like the crime lord leader on Tatooine. He ruled this crime family and kind of almost like mafia style, right? Like he had people working for him and kind of controlled this whole empire. So after, and he was in cahoots with the empire, right? The empire's like, well, we'll let you continue to doing your thing if you don't kind of step on our toes.
Okay.
Kind of deal, which I think probably the mafia probably had that kind of deal with the government. I don't know if you've done any research into that at all.
Yeah. No, I have, but continue with I don't want to interrupt with the mafia.
Because that's an fascinating topic that I need to look into as well. But
dude, I'll send you a book.
Yes, please.
All right.
So once Jabba the Hutt died, the empire died, there was like these 4 or 5 families that were just kind of trying to vie for power of this area, and none of them were really able to maintain complete control. So expand on that a little bit more about the monarchical type.
Yeah. Well, so first, like I've we both talk about, we've been conservatives, and I still have conservative values, and then I went to libertarianism because we all know something is wrong. Something is not working right. Like voting is everything is screwed up. And so I used to think, all right, maybe we need no rules. That would be the best. And then I realized, shit, that would lead to the same result. And that I read this really awesome book. It was The Bankers Behind the Revolution, Freemasons, and a word I can't, bankers behind the revolution. And basically like all these people that have ruined the monarchical power of these countries in the name of freedom, in the name, you're not really free under a king. You're only free if you have a vote. Well, they were all Freemasons. They're all the same people that are oppressing us now. So that led me to start thinking, what if they broke down each country systematically to put a constitutional republic, because that's what they knew they could break down the easiest. So if you have a king and like a powerful, you need morality. So you have a king and you have a powerful church or whatever religion, I guess. You will, that protects the people the most. And like a poor example is if you have a family that rules America and they want to pass America down to their offspring. So they're not going to chop down every tree in California and sell it for paper in one go. They're going to cut it down a quarter of it.
Conserve it. They're going to try to maintain it. And
right.
Yeah.
So they're going to think about their country's needs first. So we have the opposite here, where these politicians, they want to enrich themselves quickly as possible in their time in office, get out. If there's nothing left, they got theirs. So it brought me to this belief that I think, and he doesn't need to be a monarch, but we need nationalism back. And I hate, race means so little to me. My wife is Asian, but like we should all be on the same side. And that's why they do this, because if we all were like, yo, we could have a great country here. We have enough resources. We could build this up, but that's nationalistic. So that, they'll say, what are you, Hitler or what, and the CIA has also killed every single nationalist leader of those third world countries that was like, you know what, I'm not letting American corporations rob my people blind and enslave them. They would hammer them in the press, and they install a coup and overthrow the leader, which, as millions of times, hundreds of times they've done this. So that's why, like, my new belief is that they throw around fascism like it's this inherently bad word. And the way we have it today and the way that Star Wars and your book is written, it's absolutely would suck because it's a global or galactic fascism. But if you had a nationalistic leader who controlled everything, they would make decisions that, maybe you wouldn't agree with all the time and you probably couldn't criticize, which would suck, but they would be in the benefit most time if they were truly a good, person in in your country's best interests. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that does make sense. I think, one drawback, and I think you mentioned this about, like, it's kind of like a family-ish or maybe a set of family kind of lineage kind of thing where they want to keep it good into the future. I think that works until, you get to that spoiled brat kid, right?
Yes,
I think we've all known like people who had like family-owned businesses, and like people that have like, I know a guy who's like, his dad moved over here from Italy, right? And he had nothing when he came here. Then he took over his father's business, and he still has that mindset. But it's like generations down the road, I think they start to lose some of that. Not in all situations, obviously, but there's always that worry that are they still going to have that same, mindset and mentality, and maybe they will if they're brought up right and they have those ideals and they're raised correctly and they're brought up on the correct teachings and things. I think that could work. Right. And I think to your point, in a lot of movies and stuff too, right, we're always meant to see these kings as like terrible people, right? Like look at movie like Braveheart, right? These like Scottish rebels, they're going up against the big bad king who's imposing his will on all of them. Well, it's one side of the story.
Yeah.
But what happens when I don't necessarily know the story of what happens when they achieve their independence, right? Do they end up is it just a great lovey-dovey world after that? I don't know. Well, because I think whenever you have people that want to, like, even like I will say, use a Star Wars example. This actually works out pretty well. Is that whenever these rebels were trying to overthrow the Empire, they had to do a lot of kind of evil stuff to get there. If you think about it, the original movie, and it's kind of a meme that's gone around, I'm sure you've seen it, where it's like, young farm boy is radicalized by a group of wizards to blow up the Death Star.
Yeah.
It's basically the rebels are like a terrorist cell.
Yeah.
So depending on what your viewpoint is, they could have been the villains.
Right.
Like the Empire set up this system, and they had control, and they had authority, they had a hierarchy, they had a tree of what does what and what does what. And these, this farm boy just comes in and blows them up. But it goes to the theory that these rebellions and things that want to take over these huge, topple these huge empires. Um, I think there's a lot of like bloodthirst, and there's a lot of um, to topple an empire, you have to be
Yes.
nasty. You have to almost be evil yourself. So
Yes.
when they take that over, are they any better, right, than what they thought they were fighting against? And I think a lot of times it's probably not. And I'm sure you may know more about the history of some of that stuff than I do as far as revolutions in the past. But I guess from a surface level view, I think they think they're doing the right thing, and then what they end up is actually probably worse
Well, think about like,
than the system that was in place before.
you know, like the Bolshevik Revolution, dude. Like that was funded by Wall Street. There was so much blood in the street. Um, like the hallways literally had like a foot of blood that's coagulated. The sewers were backed up with blood. And I mean, when that change happened, production, economy, everything went down. They had nothing. They were dying. We're starving. Our bankers fed them. And like, so, you know, no one ever talks about that. Or like just the French Revolution, you know, I think they're making a movie, or they did, of Marie Antoinette. And like they cheer that, like, you know, people laugh that they beheaded this person. Like we've been ingrained. And that's what brings me to this theory even more, that like we are ingrained to see this, you know, royal families, and they switched to royal family. They put in corrupt ones along, like in the 1700s. But regardless, we think of them as evil people, so they deserved it. But in reality, we gave up that they protected us in a sense. Like, you know, yes, there was bad kings, and that's the ones they always focus on. Yes, there were bad people, but it raised human civilization. In the Bible, there's a king that's supposed to be the hierarchical order. But I don't know. I just wanted, you know, I feel when I heard that theory, I was like, no way. What? No way.
But, well, and it's interesting, even over the past few years, right? Like whenever Trump took office, people were like, oh, he's gonna drain the swamp. Like people really basically wanted like every politician that they hated, like hanging on the street, right? Like that's what people wanted to see.
Yes.
And it's like, you know, I think a lot of, you would agree, a lot of politicians are corrupt, but it's like, where does that line of thinking end? Yeah. Right? Like think of the people that work in jails. Like they're like the executioner, right? They're the ones that are putting the needle into somebody to end their life. Yeah. You know, like that's for one, that's a huge burden, I would say. But you know, you seeking justice and killing, it's just like, you know, they always say in the movies, like people always want revenge, but it's never enough. You never can have enough. You will never be satisfied. It's like a drug. Like you're just constantly chasing this high that you're never going to get, you know, like, and then you see kind of a swamp creature around every corner. Like, oh, we got to hang them too. We got to do this. We got to do that. Like, right. No different than in the 50s where like everybody was a Russian asset. Right. So we're going to kind of root out everybody. And I think to a certain extent, I think people come at that from a good mindset about wanting to kind of clear a lot of that crap out of our world. But, you know, if you're the ones inflicting all that, if you're the firing squad guy, okay, those guys are done. Then what? You're just gonna go on with your life, go back to farming, right. And like, no, you're gonna probably keep wanting more and more blood.
Yeah.
And I don't think that spiritually is the right way to live. I definitely think that, you know, even Jesus said that, you know, you're supposed to, you know, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and you know his apostles said that, you know, you're supposed to you know, submit to your leaders, you know, obviously within reason,
right?
You know, not forsaking what you stand for, but to a certain extent, you're supposed to respect and obey those people that are in authority, and it's hard. I mean, I'm no arbiter of always doing the right thing in that. I mean, I think it's easy to kind of make fun of and hate all these people inflicting all this stuff on me, but that is kind of counter to what the scripture says.
Well, I'm going to make you a monarchist out of you yet, Kyle. So where can they get your book? How can they support Conspiracy Kyle and all those good things?
Sure. So you can find my podcast. It's called Conspiracy in the Force. It's on any podcast platform. It's on YouTube. I started doing a lot of YouTube live streams. I've been having a lot of great fun with that. On Rockfin as well. And then my book is called Intergalactic Totalitarianism. It's available on Amazon. You can get it on Amazon as the paperback version, It's a Kindle version, and within the past 2 weeks, I just released the audiobook version as well, which was a pain in the ass to do, to be quite honest. But I'm glad to get that out there, because like, you know, you can't write a book based on a podcast you do and not do an audio version of it.
I agree.
It didn't make any sense. So I put that out there. It's almost 4 hours long. So go check it out. I added, you know, I made it as entertaining as I could. You know, I added like some music and stuff in the background and some sound effects and things. So feel free to go check. And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at conspiracy_Kyle, and it's conspiracy with a K, so I don't get banned. like
Perfect,
Jack did
dude.
on Twitter.
Yeah. Oh, let's not even talk about that. So Kyle, thanks for being on the show, dude. I'll tag all your links and stuff. I have Kyle's book. Support our community. And dude, it was a lot of fun talking with you, man.
Yes,
so have a great night.
Appreciate it.
We'll talk soon, I'm sure.
All right. Thanks.
All right, dude. Take care. Bye.